Welcome to the Copenhagen Blouse sewing tutorial, a blouse inspired by the styles captured at Copenhagen Fashion Week. There are 4 customization options: round neck, V-neck, ties and buttons fastenings. There is also a pattern for both pre-hemmed and regular textiles, so you can keep embroidered or lace hems on vintage fabrics. For this pattern you will need your size cut out in the paper pattern, a tablecloth or fabric of your choice, lining fabric, fastenings, a needle and thread, pins, and a sewing machine. To get started, cut out your pattern pieces from your textile using the layout plans provided in the PDF Universal Instructions download. Once cut, you should have the back bodice piece, a right and left front bodice, 2 sleeves, right and left, and 2 cuffs. If you are lining your blouse, you will need a back and both front bodice pieces. Before you start, make sure you have marked all of the notches from the paper pattern onto your fabric pieces. Then you can start by taking the back bodice piece and both front bodice pieces and placing them right sides facing each other. Then sew the sides and shoulder seams with 1 centimeter seam allowance. If you are making the regular pattern with lining, sew your bodice lining the same way. You can optionally finish your inside seams with an overlocker or zigzag stitch. The following steps will depend on what style blouse you are making. Follow the timestamps to find your compatible instructions. Round neck, lined bodice instructions. Take your main bodice piece and place it so that the right side is facing you. Place the bodice lining front side facing the main bodice and inside seams facing out. Pin the lining to the bodice starting at the corners and making your way around the entire blouse. Only the armholes should be left untouched. Lining up the sewn shoulder and side seams first will make it easier to make sure the bodice and lining perfectly match. After you have pinned the bodice, we're going to add either button loops or ties, depending on the fastening option you have chosen. In this example, I'm going to be using button loops. Take one of your loop strands and fold it in half. Then place it sandwiched between the bodice and the lining. Pin it in place. Make sure the loop is facing inwards and the ends of the loop are facing towards the edge of the hem. Do this for all of your button loops. If you are using ties, sandwich them the same way, making sure the raw end of the tie is against the hem of the fabric. Next, sew around the entire pinned area. When you get to the button loops, run the machine back and forth a few times to secure them in place. Once sewn, trim the excess fabric on the corners and make small snips or use pinking shears around the seam allowance of the neckline to help the curve sit more comfortably. Turn the bodice the right way out by pulling the fabric through one of the open armholes. Push out the corners and give the bodice a good press. Once pressed, your bodice should look something like this. Before moving on to the sleeves, you can optionally basting stitch your lining and bodice pieces together at the armhole. This will make it easier when you come to attach the sleeves. Skip to the timestamp shown on screen for attaching the sleeves and cuffs. V-neck, lined bodice, instructions. Take your sewn bodice and lay it right side facing you. Take your ties or button loops and pin them to the right side of the bodice using your markings or notches. Make sure the raw end of the ties or button loops matches up to the raw hem of the bodice. Next, take your lining and place it onto the bodice, right sides facing each other, sandwiching the ties or button loops between the 2 layers of fabric. Pin the lining to the bodice, starting at the corners and making your way around the entire blouse. Only the armholes should be left untouched. Lining up the sewn shoulder and side seams first will make it easier to make sure the bodice and lining perfectly match. When pinning around the V-neck, be careful not to stretch the fabric. This is what your ties or button loops should look like when sandwiched between the fabric. Next, sew around the entire pinned area. When you get to the button loops, run the machine back and forth a few times to secure them in place. Once sewn, trim the excess fabric on the corners. Turn the bodice the right way out by pulling the fabric through one of the open armholes. Push out the corners and give the bodice a good press. Before moving on to the sleeves, you can optionally basting stitch your lining and bodice pieces together at the armhole. This will make it easier when you come to attach the sleeves. Skip to the timestamp shown on screen for attaching the sleeves and cuffs. Round neck, bias bound hem instructions. Take your bodice and your bias tape. Pin and sew all the way around the front of the neckline, leaving a 1-inch excess of bias binding. Once sewn, open up the end of the bias tape and fold up to the edge of the bodice. Then, double fold the rest of the bias tape up and over so that the bias tape is folded to the inside of the bodice. Press the bias binding in place. Once pressed, gently unfold the bias tape and trim 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimeter of the excess inside seam allowance. Then, refold the bias binding, press and top stitch in place. Your bias bound neckline is finished, and you can now move on to attaching the sleeves. Skip to the timestamp shown on screen for attaching the sleeves and cuffs. V-neck, bias bound hem instructions. Take your bodice and your bias tape. Pin and sew all the way around the front of the neckline, leaving a 1-inch excess of bias binding. Once sewn, open up the end of the bias tape and fold up to the edge of the bodice. Then, double fold the rest of the bias tape up and over so that the bias tape is folded to the inside of the bodice. Press the bias binding in place. Once pressed, gently unfold the bias tape and trim 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimeter of the excess inside seam allowance. Then, refold the bias binding, press and top stitch in place. Your bias bound neckline is finished, and you can now move on to attaching the sleeves. Attaching the sleeves, instructions. You can optionally basting stitch your bodice and lining together to make the process of attaching the sleeve easier. To start, take both sleeve pattern pieces and fold them in half, right sides facing each other. Sew the long edge of the sleeve with 1 centimeter seam allowance. You can optionally finish the raw hems with an overlocker or zigzag stitch. To create the gathers on the shoulders, sew 2 lines of basting stitch, starting and finishing at each of the notches marked on the paper pattern. Tie off one end of both rows of basting stitch. On the other end, make sure all ends of thread are to the top side of the fabric. Separate the threads. Then, take the first 2 threads and start to gently pull on the threads to create gathers. Move the gathers down the fabric until you create a moderately gathered section that starts and ends at the start and end points of the basting stitch. Tie off the remaining ends of basting stitch. Now it's time to attach the sleeves to the bodice. Take your bodice piece and place it so that the lining is facing outwards. Take your first sleeve and place it right side out. Then, place the sleeve inside the bodice so that the right sides are facing each other. At this step, make sure the front of the sleeve is matched up to the front of the bodice, using the double and single notches marked on the pattern to identify the front and back. Match up the seam of the sleeve to the side seam of the bodice and sew with 1 centimeter of seam allowance. You can optionally finish your seams with an overlocker or zigzag stitch. Attaching the cuffs. Instructions. Take the raw end of your sleeves and sew 2 lines of basting stitch, one at 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimeter and one at 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. Tie one end of both lines of basting stitch and gather with the other ends by taking the top 2 threads and gently gathering the fabric, gradually moving the gathers around the sleeve until it is fully gathered. Don't tie these ends just yet, as you may need to adjust the gathers when attaching the cuff piece. Now take both of your cuff pieces, fold in half long ways and press to create a fold line. At this point, you can optionally use iron-on facing to add more structure to the cuff, but this is not essential. Once pressed, unfold your cuffs and refold them short ways, right sides together, and sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once sewn, press the seams flat and fold the cuffs against the original fold line you created. Your cuffs should look something like this. For the next part, make sure your cuffs are inside out. Then, take your gathered sleeve and place it inside the cuff so that the right side of the sleeve is facing the right side of the cuff. At this point, you can adjust the gathers so that the sleeve and cuff match and the gathers are even. Line up the sewn seams, pin and sew in place. Once sewn, you can optionally overlock or zigzag stitch your inside seams. Then turn the cuff the right way around and with an unpicker or pin, carefully pull out the visible basting stitch and your cuffs are finished. Buttons fastening. Instructions. To finish the buttons on the bodice, you can mark with a removable pen adjacent to each of your button loops. Where you place your buttons is personal preference, as you could place them at 3 to 5 centimeters for a crossover bodice look, or like me, you can attach at 1.5 centimeters for a symmetrical look. To sew on the buttons, start with a self-anchoring stitch, then attach the buttons, sewing through the buttonholes 3 to 4 times. Finish by tying off the thread and hiding the tail between the blouse and the lining. For attaching ties and button loops to pre-hem fabric, see pattern instructions 04 and 05. This is the end of the Copenhagen blouse tutorial. I wish you all the best in completing your blouses, and we would love to see what you create. Tag us on Instagram at spilt.milk.uk or send us a DM. Thank you for watching and choosing to craft with us.